So we're entering into free agency starting next week. We're getting closer to the tempering phase of free agency. So let's kind of discuss some areas that we think that we can actually fill in this year's free agency. Let's talk about that. And welcome back to another video here on the Washington Football Maniacs podcast. My name is Greg. I'm your host. Thank you for joining us. And this podcast is dedicated to news and commentary for the Washington Commanders. If you're down with that, please make sure you have subscribed. And when you do, also make sure that you hit that notification bell so you won't miss any other video releases. And also check out our partners with Mint Mobile. They can save you a lot of money, and I'm about ready to tell you in the next few videos a nice mine just went blank. A nice thing that they're going to do as far as their special. So just check that out. Yeah. Haven't had coffee this morning, folks. I ran out, so you know what that's going to be like. So fill in the blanks when you see me just standing here or sitting here staring at the camera, and I just can't get the thoughts out. That happens all the time. So, folks, talking about the thoughts, we're thinking about free agency because, the combine is over. We are almost here at free agency, and the Washington Commanders have the biggest amount of cap space, of cap money. And of course, we keep hearing that, they're not going to be explosive and splashy and all this in free agency. You don't expect them to come out and spend money galore and pick up all of these free agents. Because again, like I keep saying, I feel like I say it in every single podcast, Adam Peters wants to build the team through the draft and supplement with free agency. So supplementation, how much does that supplementation play into rebuilding this team? So obviously there's going to be some players that you can't get in free agency that hopefully you can draft, and then vice versa. There's going to be some positions that you might be able to fill in free agency. You're just not going to be able to fill them with the right guy in the draft. And then on top of that, you just may not be able to fill those positions and have to ride with, the player that was in that position before and hope you can continue to develop those players. But I'm talking about some obviously one of the most impressive areas that stand out as far as a need, especially after last week, hearing that the Washington Commanders had cut Charles Leno, is certainly offensive tackle, left tackle specifically. And then we hear about Tyron Smith from the Dallas Cowboys, who, he is certainly, he returned to elite form this past year. And he had played 942 snaps, including the playoffs, which is his highest total since 2018 per Pro Football Focus. But there have been questions as far as it seems like he can't ever stay healthy for all 17 games. And that's going to be an issue. You need that left tackle. But when he's healthy, when he's playing well, he can be one of the best left tackles. Now, of course, nothing close to Trent Williams' style, but still, he's probably the best tackle right now in free agency. And um, the biggest thing, though, is his age. He's 33 years old. And for some of the younger fans out there, that is ancient. He should be already, be making his peace with. No, I'm not going to go there. So yeah, I mean he's definitely he's older. That's going to be an issue. But how many of you right now would take Trent Williams back? You'd take him back in a heartbeat. Now, provided, yeah, Trent Williams is probably a lot better than Tyron Smith, but Tyron Smith is pretty solid. He's in my mind, he is definitely an upgrade to Charles Leno, but age and staying healthy, those are some two major things to look at. But do you go with him? Here's the thing: there's not a lot of left tackles in the draft outside of the top two. So are you going to be able to develop on those guys? Are they going to be starters from the get-go? Because we need somebody to fill that position. Charles Leno is no longer there. So we're going to have to pick up somebody. I almost feel like you have to in free agency, but I haven't really been a lot that I've been impressed with necessarily. A lot of these tackles are right tackles, which we do need help on the right side. I think we're keeping Wiley. Maybe, I don't know. I mean, they haven't cut him yet, so we've cut Nick Bates. Yes, that's right, Nick Bates. No coffee, folks. No coffee. Wow. So certainly we also have to look at guard, and there's a lot of guards. Mike Onwenu. From the Patriots. Let's see. The write-up says Patriots did Onwenu a huge favor, and I'm sorry if I am not pronouncing his last name right, about returning him to right tackle midway through last season. While he's an excellent guard, he's better as a bookend, which is great for us because I would like for him to replace Wiley. If we could pull him in, maybe Wiley is better as a left guard, because obviously we're going to need to replace Bates. So that would be one that I would look at as far as the right tackle. And again, left tackle, maybe see if you can get Tyron Smith. There is Trent Brown again, who's from the Patriots. Brown was a difference maker when he suited up in New England. Unfortunately, he's only topped 600 snaps once in the last 5 seasons and has a history of generating dramatic headlines at previous stops. So I don't know if you want the hassle of Trent Brown, but he could possibly be a difference maker if you could straighten him out. There's a lot of who I consider right tackles. Not a lot at left tackle. Honestly, Tyron Smith is really the only one out of free agency that I would consider. And I know he's 33, but Trent Brown's 31, so he's not too far behind. The rest of the guys are still, well, except for Andreas Pete, who's 30. Well, Donovan Smith, who's 31. I don't know. I think out of those guys, certainly Tyron Smith. Why not? I mean, if you only need him for a year or two until you're able to draft a good left tackle, then maybe consider bringing him in for a year or two. Would definitely help as far as the development of your quarterback to have guys up front that you know are going to be solid players. But what about tight ends? There's only 2 tight ends that appear to be available right now. Hunter Henry, He's 29 years old. He's still got plenty of tread left. Um, Henry is a proven complete tight end, plus a blocker and a red zone threat. He'll upgrade some team as a starter. Hunter Henry. I think you really need to look at him, bringing him in if you can. Then you got Noah Font. Tight ends typically develop on the slow timeline. Font has grown more reliable as a player without losing his incredible athleticism. So you do have two tight ends in free agency that you could look at if you don't go in the draft route. Who else do we want? I mean, let's just sneak and let's look at edge. Let's look at edge. Edge rushers, Danielle Hunter. He was actually one that I was looking at a few weeks ago. But I mean, it's going to cost you. As the write-up says, Hunter's productivity holdout last summer led to a one-year deal worth up to $20 million with the guarantee that the team could not tag him. He proceeded to rack up 16.5 sacks, proving again he can transcend any scheme. Hunter was definitely one that I was looking at a few weeks ago thinking we should consider bringing him in at edge. Now, I know that right now Dan Quinn is looking at Jamin Davis as far as making him more of a hybrid player and bringing him in to be a little bit of an edge pass rusher. But you have Danielle. If you could bring in a Danielle Hunter, that would really solidify. I really like KJ Henry. I think that he can develop into something fantastic. If not fantastic, at least pretty solid. So, could you imagine? And you still got guys like Smith Williams, guys you can rotate in, but I feel like you at least need one pass rusher that has that side hammered down. Danielle Hunter could be that guy. Then you could bring in Jamin Davis, convert him to a more of a hybrid role, and that could really help you out quite a bit. That was really the only one I really considered, of course, out of edge rushers. Excuse me. Cornerbacks, I didn't really look at cornerbacks as much. I did look at quarterbacks, though. And, of course, I love messing with people when we talk about quarterbacks because people are they are so triggered if you don't start talking about taking their favorite quarterback in the draft. And they're triggered if you do talk about taking one of the top three quarterbacks out of, from the draft. So you can't win with this. And just the talk about Kirk Cousins, and all this that he's open to coming back to Washington. I mean, I know that that's kind of smoke and mirrors. I think in the end, he's probably going to wind up in Atlanta. But the thought that having Kirk Cousins coming back, to me, I would welcome him back. Now, everybody's like, nope, too old, coming off of a Achilles injury. He's washed up. He should just be in a wheelchair the rest of his life. Just live out the rest of your days with that $250 million you got in bank and be happy. I mean, that's how people are treating Kirk Cousins. But you got to think that was the only injury Kirk Cousins has had in his career. He has, when he's been able to start, he has started every single game he's played in. And, maybe I shouldn't say that, but what I'm trying to say is once he became the starter, he has not relinquished that. He has, because of injury or anything else, he has been a dependable starter. He's played well. I mean, yes, people say he's stat patter. That was the thing coming out of Washington. Well, he's stat patter. We don't need him. He gets all of his stats in garbage time. And I will say there was a little bit of suspect when he goes to the Minnesota Vikings after the Vikings go like 14-2, and then all of a sudden they're like 8-8. Um, but Kirk Cousins still, I mean, he is a good player. He's a very solid player. I would argue he's one of the top 10 quarterbacks in the league. And so bringing him in, especially with somewhat of an improved offensive line, even if you go ahead and you draft a quarterback, people just assume that these quarterbacks are robots, and that every single one of them, um, especially if they're drafted in the first two or three positions, that they're going to automatically be able to start in any situation. And maybe and maybe not. But having a guy like Kirk Cousins come in, maybe play for you for a couple of years while that quarterback is being developed, why not? I mean, we're not going to the Super Bowl next year. I hate to tell you that. We may be ready to make a push by 2026, but this team is not going to the Super Bowl right now. So knowing that, why not look at Kirk Cousins? I think all options should be on the table. Jacoby Brissett, um, he's a solid backup. He's a guy who can come in and play for you, start for you for a few games, but he is not somebody that you're going to want to have as a full-time starter. He has not shown that he could be a full-time starter in the league, and I think he's just fine with that. Come in, well, he's probably not that fine. I can't speak for him, but when he gets his opportunity, he makes the best of his opportunity. He's a good player. He's a very good player. Um, but I don't think that he would necessarily be a top 10 quarterback ever. So, um, honestly, he's probably going back to New England. I've heard rumors of that. And maybe you should. Maybe you should go back to New England and battle for the starting position there. Obviously, Matt Jones is not going to be there. And of course, I can't end this podcast without mentioning Russell Wilson. Oh my dear Lord, people are being triggered. People are being triggered. Oh no. Don't you dare, Greg, mention Russell Wilson. Don't you dare mention Russell Wilson. And, Russell Wilson had a horrible experience in Denver. I mean, he still played pretty good last year. His first season in Denver, I mean, the coach was Nathaniel Hackett, got fired, and just was not a good season for the Broncos altogether. Not a good thing for Russell Wilson. In comes Sean Payton, and you feel like, oh, wow, this is going to be the revival of Russell Wilson. And then obviously the drama around that, just some of the things that the Broncos were trying to do to ensure that, Wilson wouldn't get more money out of him. I don't know. I think they were trying their best to save a dime here and there off of Russell Wilson's contract. I think Wilson still has an opportunity to go somewhere else and show that he's still a dependable quarterback in the league. I mean, my thoughts of Russell Wilson has not changed, and I know that the way that the NFL fan is nowadays, it's once you've hit kind of a rough point, that's it. You're washed up. You don't need to play another down in the NFL. You need to retire. And I kind of look at these guys and I'm like, you know what? There's more than just, what you're seeing on the field. What is going on truly? And I think that Russell Wilson still has an opportunity to be one of the better quarterbacks in the league. And I think that he can show somebody, wherever he goes to, if it's Las Vegas, I feel like that would be a good opportunity for him in Las Vegas. But I think he can still show that he can be one of the top quarterbacks in the league. I really do. I have that much faith in Russell Wilson. Would I want him to come here again? As long as we draft the quarterback and that we know that we're going to have that quarterback ready to go for us in a season or two, then I would bring Russell Wilson in for, for at least a year just to see what he can do. Maybe 2 years if he proves me right. Why not? I love Russell Wilson. I really do. The rest of these guys, Gardner Minshew, I've always loved him. He's still young. He's 28 years old. He honestly, I think that he could be a solid backup at least. But I still feel like that Sam Howell should be groomed to at least be the backup. I mean, he's going to be cheaper. In the end, I'm not shopping in this year's free agency if I'm going to get a quarterback for a guy who's going to be a backup. I believe in Sam Howell enough that he can be a backup. So I don't think there's any need to look at these quarterbacks and say, which one of these can I bring in as a backup? If I'm looking at any of these guys, I'm bringing them in because I feel like that they can start. So really comes down to Kirk Cousins or Russell Wilson for me. If I was going to go the free agency route and get a quarterback in free agency who I'm going to automatically name the starter for this year while I decide who is going to ultimately be developed as our starter for the future. But folks, honestly, edge, tackle, interior, offensive line, those are the positions, really, the biggest positions that I would say that I'm looking at as far as supplementing in free agency. I just don't think that outside of quarterback, honestly, I think that you can look at the draft and draft some guys, and you can also look at the guys that you have on the team and see if there's a way to make them better in the system that Dan Quinn and Joe Witt Jr. are going to install in Washington. So, we could look at cornerback, and I think maybe in the next podcast we will look at cornerback and safety just to make sure that there's nobody in there that we would maybe want to consider bringing in. Or maybe we're looking at re-signing guys like Kendall Fuller. And may not be such a bad idea to go ahead and maybe re-sign him to a short-term contract. Okay. Let's just really quickly with cornerback. I know that Snead is probably going to be available. If you could bring him in along with Kendall Fuller, that would be a very solid secondary. And then maybe you look at moving some of these other guys around. Maybe put Forbes in as a slot corner. See what he can do there. Benjamin St. Juste, do you keep him around? If you do, again, maybe these guys are rotation guys. But Snead would certainly be a huge upgrade in that secondary. Maybe we don't have to do another video. We'll just cover it in this. But there's going to be, I think that there's going to be enough in here out of everybody I've mentioned in this podcast. The only one to me, or the only two for me that I really feel like that the Commanders should pursue would be Danielle Hunter and Tyron Smith. I think that those guys are the two guys that I would look at, and you don't have to sign those guys. Well, Danielle Hunter, I would sign him to at least maybe a 3-year deal, if possible. He's probably going to want more. But I really like him. I would bring him in, and Tyron Smith, I would sign him, to at least maybe a 2-year deal. Um, I'm sure most of these guys are going to want at least a 3-year deal. So I wouldn't sign them to a 5-year deal at all. I mean, that's ridiculous, but maybe a 3-year deal at the most. Bring them in and keep looking for your future left tackle. But you have somebody in there who will be an anchor on that offensive line. So that's what I would consider doing. You guys let me know in the comments what you think is the best out of all of these. But my two, Tyron Smith, Daniel Hunter, maybe Hunter Henry as well with tight end. And out of that, who do you got? Let's keep in mind we're building through the draft first, so we're just supplementing in free agency. So don't expect the Commanders to go all splishy splashy in free agency. That's not going to happen. All right, folks. I hope you enjoyed this podcast. If you did, give it a like, give it a share. Let us know how we did. And with that said, I will see you in the next one. Take care.